might be both.
Might be the same. Good morning, March 5th, everyone, everywhere, here now. Glad to have you listening, participating, interacting. We are coming together again on a Sunday morning in Los Angeles and Venice at the beach, drizzling, white skies, very unusual for Los Angeles. It's been cold, like my attitude used to be, or more like my attitude used to be. I still get there. I still got some icicles hanging from the inside of my skull. But we're starting the month, so it's the third month. We're going to sort of base the months on the steps to the degree that we can look at them from an absolute point of view. And the third step is making a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understand God. And the fact that we could do something so profound simply in a decision points to the fact that the choices we make are greatly, almost largely, what impact our experience. If we sat quietly and made no choices, that would be a pure meditative state. There's not a lot going on in that state except a sense of place and pure awareness. But it's very hard to eat in that state. It's very hard you can breathe well in that state, but getting things done doesn't tend to happen in that state very well. And yet I suspect it's the nature of our awareness. But our human experience is very different than that in the sense that it is about making choices and about making functional choices and things that benefit ourselves sufficiently to have an abundance to give rather than simply run around and be scared for the thinking we're doing that is scarce and wonder why we don't tend to have enough and need to seem to fight everything and everyone to try to get more. So if choice can be so simple as to simply make a decision, then that's what choices in fact are. It's just decisions. So if we're deciding to have the conversation, we're deciding to look at what our culpability is and what we're creating that can't be any more immediate than anyone else's impact on us. The immediacy of my thoughts happen in my brain. They happen where my feelings happen, where my pleasure centers are, where my pain centers are. Pain doesn't register in my toe when I stub it, it registers in the brain. And that's why it takes a second to get from the toe to the brain. You know you've stubbed it, you know the pain's coming, but it takes a second before you feel it. Those are the nerves telling the brain something's wrong down here and the brain registering it. So the pain happens in the brain, the pleasure happens in the brain, thoughts happen in the brain, feelings happen in the brain. If I am creating an environment where I'm in conflict, mental anguish comes very quickly, inner conflict very quickly. There's not a lot of emotional sobriety in a concept of making a decision that all I am is what I think. And so I think more about thinking and think because I'm immersed in this thoughtless process, literally, that it's reality and it's the only truth. And it's my only lifeline when in fact it's killing me. My comfort zones kill me because I'm trying to become numb to what's actually happening in the name of thinking I'm controlling it by not paying attention to it and overcoming it and denying it. So I can feel better all the time without wondering what it is that's worse that I'm constantly trying to feel better than. So that's a glimpse, maybe a Kickstarter. We've been starting a little bit before the meeting, and I think, or the discussion, and I suspect there's some roots that are planted already that are ready to be fertilized and watered in our discussion. So welcome, everyone. David is here, and M. King, and L.A., and John, and Gabe, and Sturgis, and Anthony, and Jana this morning. So we have Hawaii, France, Arizona, and a bunch of Californians.
Bonjour. Bonjour.
Well, good morning, all.
Morning.
Here and seeming there. So what's the launch today? Where do we want to look?
Within.
Okay. Instead of without?
Yeah, without a drink or a drug.
I'd like to look at where you don't need a mental obsession course. Like, what's the difference between going, hey, I'm just doing it just right, I don't need to spend time on a mental obsession course, and when is that meeting going to start? Because I really need a mental obsession course. So how much overthinking is, where do you draw the line? Does everybody have their own reason why they are here, basically?
Oh, I can guarantee you it's more than one.
Yeah.
Don't limit our potential to obscure and complicate something. It's a decision, Anthony. If our natural state is in perfect order,
It's another decision. It's one more decision.
well, if our decisions align with how things are, there's no conflict. If our decisions align with how things aren't, there's nothing but conflict. So if you're conflicted and you think more and more and more, there's something about what you're doing that isn't aligning with what's actually happening, period. So this isn't necessary. It isn't required. It isn't a must do, shall do, have to do, should do. None of those things are of any interest in my estimation. But if we're doing what we're doing, I would suspect is probably worth noting and mentioning and talking about.
Jack, I can spend hours and days thinking about things that aren't there, that
Right.
aren't real. But should someone wrong me or something happen at work or whatever, each individual here listening can be triggered by, the choice and the thought doesn't seem to be thought over. The decision is made instantaneously.
You
To
mean
go
the
down.
reaction?
Yeah, the reaction.
Okay, so that we tend to think that our thinking is only the voices that we're hearing in our heads talking, that's our consciousness. When in fact, our awareness, think of our senses, they are feeding us data 24 hours a day, and it's raw data. It doesn't have an opinion. It's what we're thinking about that data that we're actually interacting with and either struggling with, because we may not like the data we're getting, and it doesn't matter whether we like it, we're still getting it. So my sense is, Gabe, that, and this, I forget where it was when we crossed into this, probably 6 months ago or so, when we started talking about that the real impact of our thinking is the thinking we don't think we're thinking, because it seems to happen automatically. What is that? A reaction. It's a reactive defensive posture that we've taken because we're reactive and defensive about the thoughts we're maintaining that aren't true. And we don't have to think that we're doing that for that to be happening, because any thought we have about nature or any thought we have about anyone or anything that isn't right and isn't correct is going to create a disturbance in our experience somewhere. We don't have to identify it to look at it globally. We can look at the whole entirety of our thinking rather than try to think we need to think of every one of those thoughts and fix every one of those thoughts, because that just goes on endlessly, because we're thinking of the thoughts as having so much credit that they need to be looked at individually rather than see it's just a simple it's like putting the key upside down in the ignition of a car and constantly being frustrated that it won't start. If you can turn that one thing around and look at it differently, it all of a sudden fits and it turns, and all the things that seem to be impossible by the thinking that it should be upside down all of a sudden become possible. To think we're not where we are doing what we're doing is a major flaw in thinking. And for the most part, I would suggest the things you tend to think about when you say they're not happening are past events. So it's regrets, resentments, or what's the other one?
Future tripping, just thinking about,
Well, in the future would be the other direction, but in the past, there's regret and resentments and remorse.
Yeah.
So we're either angry with other people or we're angry with the self that we imagine is who we are. Because somehow we got caught off guard. Somehow we got pushed around. Somehow we didn't defend that idea well enough. Somehow we exposed ourselves in a way that has really threatened the life of that idea we have. And that damnation just goes around and around in our head trying to fix it, when all it is imagining that thought to begin with had any basis other than what we were thinking. If it's all in thinking, we're choosing to think it, it's what we're choosing that's causing that, not what's happening outside of us. It's what we're thinking about what's happening. So the thinking we think we're in the program, the 4-step, Bill talks about causes and conditions. He's talking about what are the underlying motivations beneath the surface of what we think. We call that subconscious. I would say it is not sub to our conscious. It's primary consciousness trying to act like it's not there because I don't see it. Just like I think my thoughts I can manipulate my thoughts because I don't see them. And I know you don't see them. So I can change them as quickly as I need to adjust them to have you think I'm what you want to see, because I need to make sure that how you see me is important because I doubt so much about what I'm actually doing in my own experience. I need to have your vote. I need to look better.
That's
I need
good,
to
right?
have more. I need one of Anthony's Ferraris to feel better. It's not enough for him, but
Hey, how about setting a mantra? I've never asked this, but how do you select a good mantra? Maybe that's what I need. Maybe that would be really helpful to have a good mantra. How do you pick a good mantra? By Jack.
You know what your good mantra is, Anthony? Just
What?
continuing to ask questions about questions about questions about. You've already got a great mantra, so that's your mantra. You're the chooser of it. You're the repetition of it.
His mantra should be Ferrari.
Maybe more like for are we.
That actually is my license plate.
So again, if we're making decisions and starting to see what choices, the impacts that they make. Laura Alice has a huge smile. If we're making decisions and seeing the consequences they make, it's that rather than what, where, when, why, how, it's that what's happening, that is happening, that we're doing what we're doing, that really begins to align with what's actually happening. There's not a lot of conflict in that what's happening right now is happening. I don't have to identify it all. I don't have to break it down into pieces. I don't have to think about it in any more words than that. And when you're thinking of simplicity, it's as simple as reality is reality. I don't have to know what that is. I don't have to think I know what that is for it to be whatever it is. And I would think that reality would be the basis. If we're even struggling with our thoughts as being real, we must have some inclination that reality is something to be valued, recognized. But it's not because I make it up. It's because it already it seemed to exist well before humans did. So it might be something worth considering we didn't make up. And even the makeup we consider. We talk about our own makeup and don't notice that the word is made up. We're making it up. We're just putting on liner and facial stuff and looking like, we paint our face green and we think we're barbarians. Or blue or whatever they did. I don't know. So they're all just thoughts.
So you're going to a meeting 3 hours a day to remember reality is reality?
No, you don't have to, Anthony. It's already real. It's always been real. We've always been a witness to it. We have always suffered under the impact of our own thinking in relation to it that hasn't been true, that we've struggled to get right because it's wrong. We haven't wanted to admit that little feature. And in doing it, my experience was when I started looking at this, I was horrified. I was sick in my stomach, not because it started when I looked at it, because I was starting to feel the sickness that had always been irritating me and aggravating me and nauseating me in my experience. I'd numbed myself to what was actually happening. And when I saw it, what I saw was the culmination of all the things I'd done for all the times I did them in my body, the tension, the anxiety, the stress, all of it was the culmination of every moment I had spent trying to deny what was going on. And I had a panic attack. My whole body turned gray. I thought I was dying. I'd never had something happen like that. In that way, I'd had slight anxiety things, but not the way that this was, like from my toes to my head, and my body literally turned gray like the blood was taken out of it. So in recognizing that, what I realized was that was the fear I was running from the whole time, and thought that I could avoid, while it was just building up like water behind a dam. And eventually, if the water overflows the dam collapses. The dam can hold the water back, but once the water starts going over the top of it, it starts creating forces the dam can't hold, and it will collapse a dam. That's why they have escape valves for the water, aside from the fact that it generates electricity. They can manage that. It's overwhelming. And what's interesting about the word overwhelming is that whelmed as a root word is the same as overwhelmed. And yet it's like rigorous honesty. We need to be reminded that it's overwhelmed. It's redundant. It's actually redundant. So to be whelmed is to be overwhelmed. And we feel that. That's uncomfortable. It's disturbing. It's a good indication of our accuracy in our own experience, indicating to us through our body language exactly what's happening. What do I tend to do with it? Fight it, push it down, think I'm going to control it. What happens when I eventually face it? I got a lot more to face than I would have had I just faced it as it was happening, because as it's happening, it's nothing more than what I'm thinking, and it evaporates immediately. When I've got decades of that built up in my bodily systems, I have diseases, literally, things that are not functioning well in my body as a result of having been suffocated. And the constriction of anxiety, keeping blood from areas that would normally flow and bring the nutrients that are there, that have caused tension in muscles, that are causing tension on vertebrae, and all kinds of other stuff that are going on that are not healthy. So this isn't a you should not be doing what you're doing. It is a conversation about actually beginning to concede we're doing exactly what we're doing. And I don't have to know what I'm doing to know that if I'm under stress and anxiety and such, it's probably not the best thing I can be doing. There's probably some indication that something's going on that's not quite right, because it's interfering with my whole ability to even want to have any capacity. I'm worn out and exhausted in those states. And I've been exhausted most of my life. Why? Because I've been sick and tired of myself. For real. You want to talk about reality, at least that aligns with something I can admit openly. Katie said the other day, I don't know if I said this to you guys, but my wife, Katie, who is like a bright light, and I had gotten kind of morose over some things that were going on, and it's just a little overwhelming to me. And a few days went by, and I was kind of quiet and just minding my business and all that. And I started to perk up and all that. And she said, I know you're getting better because you're really starting to irritate me again. And I just roared. I mean, it was such a relief to just hear that, because I realized that I was sort of starting to percolate again like a 9-year-old, and it just drives her a little crazy that I just want to do everything with her and just kind of skip along.
And she was being honest about how
and she's being busy. Yeah. And I thanked her for that, So I suspect we have great capacity, and I suspect doing what is actually natural is a lot easier than doing what is diseased, because it is literally easy and simple and so succinct. And yet it also doesn't require, but the facing of the culmination of everything I've ever done tends to take a minute to swallow. My throat's been constricted. I've been choking for years, and noticing that stuff. Bill says there's some big chunks we swallow. This is the big one, because now we're actually talking about the disease of addiction in the mental state, not in the substance state, not in the symptom state. This is the disease at its core. And I would suggest humanity has been struggling with this as long as humanity is made believe that killing other people is the best thing they can do to secure themselves. It's led to nothing but insecurity. And when things that are proposed outcomes happen exactly the opposite, you can start to see that the opposite thinking is at the root of that. The same kind of thinking that I can turn a fantasy into truth is the attempt to make believe a lie is no longer a lie if it ever became true. Why would it bother to lie if it was true? It wouldn't make any sense. A lie is only a lie as long as it's maintained as the opposite of being what it can never be. That's stress, and that's anxiety at its core. The ultimate addiction is to the idea that we can turn a lie into truth, and that the thoughts we have that make us uncomfortable, that cause the discomfort, are something to escape and get away from and get over and feel better than, rather than say, wait a minute, this thing is telling me I'm doing something uneasy because I'm feeling uneasy. How about I just admit that and allow it to dissipate? And if I do it in the immediacy of the moment, anything else that I'm hanging on to is going to rise up. Just like an iceberg and just like a boat when you're bailing water. Everybody in that boat rises with that boat. It could mean one person's bailing, but everybody gets the benefit. Everybody. So as we rise, everyone rises. Everybody. And another suggestion in this is that if we're having this conversation with ourself, then it means we've been reinforcing the self we think we are in the conversations we're having, when all we've been doing is talking to our thoughts, right? And anybody I see on the street talking openly to their thoughts, I would think is crazy, except until I began to realize when I thought that, I'm thinking, who's crazy? I'm thinking to myself that they're crazy because they're talking openly about what they're doing. I'm talking about them to myself. That's crazy. Who am I? But if we can do that, then the ultimate goal here, I would think, again, it's choice each of you get to make. The free will means that we get to self-diagnose our own state. Nobody's telling anybody anything that anybody's going to ever listen to, so it's not worth even trying. What I'm going to hear if I'm reactive is what I think people are saying, not what's actually being said. So I'll tailor it just to fit perfectly into my insanity, so I can say, great, I got another person there helping. But the point is that if there's some feedback somewhere.
Okay.
Okay. If I'm beginning to experience this and talk about it openly, I'm beginning to have the faith that other people actually know this too, whether they think so or not, and begin to help engage with the thinking at a level that could be very productive to the insight of my own experience and also the other person I'm talking to. And what I learned when I started talking about this is that I was not very good at talking about it. I pissed a lot of people off. I mean, I had people walk out. They didn't want to call me. They didn't talk to me. I have people still that haven't talked to me for 2 years. And, people are going to go where they go. But to address this can be very stimulating and re-stimulating, because a lot of pain and toxic thinking has gone along with the trauma that we experience in the present. My experience is there's no past, there's no post-traumatic. It's always present traumatic stress that we're struggling with. It's always in the present. The past is over. What happened is done. If we're reliving it in our own thinking, we're recreating the pain that comes with it, just like we have haunting images and nightmares that we experience that seem so real. But when we wake up, we realize what a relief they're not. This waking up is done during the daytime in our regular interactions with humans. Rather than just waking up from a sleep and a slumber, this is a spiritual awakening, and beginning to open our eyes and say, oh, I have been acting like this isn't even happening. Of course, I've been under enormous strain and struggle. Of course, that's been imposed by my own self, the imposter I thought I was. And that impression is depressing the longer I hang on to it, literally, because it's a weight I'm not ultimately designed to bear well. And the reason I'm not designed to bear it is so that it makes an impression on me that I'm heading in a direction that's wrong. And as long as I want to go there, I will continue to go. As deep as I want to dig, I'm going to dig. It's a grave. The grave doesn't have to be much more than 3 or 4 feet to work. So if I'm 20 feet deep, I'm kind of going overkill here, Don't have to go any further than I want, ever. It's always been that way. I can think it wasn't, because I was in the insanity of thinking all that I was relying on was thinking. And if the thinking served itself, I figured the self it was serving is the only thing that is, and that's who I am. And I'm against the world. I've got to conquer the world to compete with any other thought. And all I'm doing is worried about what other people are thinking and how I appear. This is about substance. This is about natural, absolute state of being. Whatever that is, I don't know. I don't know in words enough to ever say it, but I can point at it and mention that if it's what we are based in, you already know it, so you don't need me, Anthony.
Jack, you were speaking on the trauma and then the thoughts of people, what people think about you or whatnot. And, since I've been having these conversations, especially with you and John, it's like it's made me confront a lot of things to where I'm constantly thinking and digging, as you say. I was happy you said that word, digging, because I was, it's like I've been digging and digging and starting to unearth some feelings and some old traumas and stuff like that, and to find a little bit more peace you know, inside of myself, you know, because I know I've been dealing with some things, and I'm quick to forget something, you know, and I knew something was bothering me, because I would meet someone and you can tell me your name and I'll totally forget your name in a heartbeat. And I don't know where that came from. And it's been a bad habit lately where it's like, I really can't remember people's names now, just their faces. And I don't know if that was because of past trauma or, you know, something that's inside of me that's opening up. But I'm so focused on this thinking now. Like I said, you know, I've been trying to write, and now I'm so focused on everything in my life. And then even in the past, but I have to bring it to the present to make sense of it, and then to try to express it. And like when I talk to people, and it's like now it seems like, damn, I didn't realize how much I've been through, but it's not my excuse. It's just in, you know, letting people know who I am. But it seems now, lately, it just seems like a repetitive song of hurt and pain and trying to get people to understand me, when all I want to be is just open. I just want to be open. And that's it.
Well, forget about anybody trying to understand you. That's a losing cause.
Yes.
Because I would say that, you know, I want to point to a bunch of things in what you said, David. And one of them, to start with, is the idea that we're actually digging, the idea that it's actually buried. These are all ideas we concoct to justify not seeing it. It's always been present. We've been creating narratives and illusory ideas in our mind to give us some justification for doing what's absolutely insane. So we think it's buried. It's not in the earth. It is not in the earth. It's actually, we're standing on the earth in the brains. Our brains are as high above our body as anything in our body. It's not in the earth, but we think about it in those ways. We create those narratives to give it some context to justify the insanity of doing it. It's buried. It's deep within me. It was so far in the past. No, it's always in the present. It's what we're doing with what we think of the past in the present that's always impacting us. It's our actual experience right now, always has been. Now you're making the points that we can easily also think it isn't happening. If we're capable of thinking what's happening isn't happening, that means we are extremely free to think whatever we want. Because to think what isn't happening is all that's happening is insane. So what are we thinking is happening but what we think? And what are we voiding? Thinking we're voiding anyhow. Reality, truth, whatever it is, whatever the expansiveness is that we're all sharing and a part of in this universe, if that's the limits of our experiences, is the universe. I suspect it's infinitely greater than that, because if the universe is constantly growing, it apparently has more growth to do, just like our thinking. We kind of think of it that way. But if we're beings, we're not in a spatially bound dynamic. We're actually witnessing things from an all-knowing state of being that knows. And the contrast is what we're struggling with. We wouldn't know better if we didn't know what's right in an absolute sense. And there's no digging there because there's no space there. There's no time there. There's nothing. It's just the present nature of the present. So I say that just to mention that we're often very convenient in the way we talk about things, so we can continue to justify that other things are buried in that hole that we never seem to get to the bottom of, because we keep thinking it isn't absolutely happening right now. And as a result, we feel caught off guard by what happens and feel like unexpectedly we all of a sudden try to figure out what's wrong by thinking about what circumstances is wrong, rather than the constant annoyance we're facing by pretending it's not all happening right now, and that we can be asleep to it. Even when we're asleep, all of our senses are working. And even when we pretend to be asleep, everything that's happening is still happening. And we can go as far as we want in that direction, but we're creating imagery to create a movie, a projection of thought in our head to justify not saying it's happening right now in every way, and everything that's ever impacted me and every bit of trauma is present right now. It's all here. It is with me now. It is what I do with it now that either is present traumatic stress that I create, or the beginning of dissipating that by just simply saying, wow, this is really uncomfortable to sit with because everything I've ever practiced has been bent on trying to avoid it, deny it, reshape it, remake it, come up with some other way to see it. And you even started by saying this has made you start to look at that stuff, forgetting that the free choice to look at it is as free as the making of the denial of it. So nothing here is making you do it, but when you start looking at it, you start freely seeing, wow, I even feel like I have to be made to do this to look at it honestly. And there's generally a lot there. So the point about other people not understanding you is that if humanity has been stuck in this addictive nature for so long, and an addictive nature is not natural because it's all reversed, it's unnatural, most of what people hear has nothing to do with you at all, any more than what you hear about them, like their name, and it disappears immediately. It's because you're thinking about what they're thinking about you. That's what's important to you. What are they going to think about me? How do I look now? Boy, I could have been better. I could have done better. I could have done more. I could be all that stuff that comes up all of a sudden in the face of another human, which again makes the point here that communicating with other humans about what's going on accurately begins to give you a foothold in seeing we're not doing this alone. We're doing it collectively because we're doing it individually. And the commitment that we have to make those choices individually does not make us alone. It makes us free to make choices in favor of what's happening rather than in opposition to what's happening. And when I make them in opposition, I don't want to know anybody else's name. I'm too busy trying to figure out what my name is. I haven't even come to conclusion with that. I don't even know what to call this self that's constantly changing, that I'm trying to corral and ride like a bull. And again, imagery, even that, the riding of the bull, the difficulties and all that kind of stuff. It's just an image. We know the peril we face by witnessing the experience we're having. We know it. And my job in my life had been to become insensitive to it all, desensitized, numb. And I realized that numbness is actually evidence of pain, not the absence of pain. Toes and heels, and I don't know what that bone is beneath the big toe. If it rubs against a shoe too long that are worn, especially women in high heels that are wearing shoes that are so tight, it starts to develop a callus there and it starts to grow to try to buffer the grind of that pressure. Our body knows to try to minimize problems. If we're not going to do anything about it, it's going to cause something to go numb for us. And our bodies are largely numb. We've been desensitized, and for sentient being, that is exactly the opposite direction of our design. It's an attempt to claim control and think we're in control by killing the body that ultimately has the brain has the control over the body. If I'm misusing my brain, I am undermining its ability to function in every respect on behalf of my own survival and everyone else's. So seeing it, David, I suspect is just the honesty of looking at it. And it's not something you're made to do, but when you start, it seems like something completely so opposed to everything you've done that it just seems like, wow, it's really taken a lot to finally even look at this. And that was certainly my situation. I used to create situations that were so horrible. And I finally realized I was trying to get my own attention. I was so unwilling to face what was happening. I had to create an absolute nightmare in the world to face, just to remind myself of the capacity I have to manifest. I'm always manifesting something. It's just that I'm so ashamed to admit that the manifestation is what I'm actually facing that I pretend it's happening to me because I don't want to say, what a mess I've created here. What an amazing, complicated, seemingly problematic, intractable problem I've once again made to face, to give myself the perspective that I can do this. I certainly am very good at doing that. I'm not as good at creating things that are bountiful and accessible and reachable and favorable. And that's what this conversation is about, starting to see that as a unified group of humans, there is no darkness in the world that can hide from light, ever. Ever. So shadows of doubt that I create are all obstructions I'm making believe or limiting my capacity to justify my own lack of participation at an absolute honest level. So to talk about this globally is to start to see too that we are all just reflections of what all humans are doing to some degree. And that gives us a binding glue to everything everywhere, rather than only me here now thinking only about me here now and what I need to do to look better for everybody else, when everybody else doesn't even notice how I look at all, for the most part. I'm just an old bald man for the most part, wandering the streets. I mean, what are people going to think? Whatever they want. If they don't understand me, I'm pining for their understanding while I'm misunderstanding my own source. And I'm never going to get enough from them, and they're never going to see it clearly enough because I'm seeing it through a foggy lens to begin with that's completely backward. So it isn't to say I don't care what people think, but I am illuminated by what people think very often, because it gives me perspective that is often not anything I could have imagined, and reminds me that a lot of what I can't imagine are things I don't even want to imagine. They're not the great things. They're not the grandiose things. They're not the prideful, arrogant things. They're not the big things. They're just the simple things. Katie told me I had bad breath last night. She's never said that to me. And I said, thank you. You know, sometimes I wonder. I don't know. I eat stuff during the day. I don't always go back to the bathroom, brush my teeth. And I said, I really appreciate it. We've been working as a couple to begin to just say the little things that I said to her, if I'm interested in telling you my thoughts, I would like to hear more of your thoughts. And she's started, and it's really been amazing to see the freedom that comes out of it, and the openness and the appreciation for things that might normally often feel offensive. Well, you have bad breath too. Yeah, of course we do. You know, whose farts smell great? Right? I mean, the whole point of it.
Yeah. Roses.
I mean, I guess vegetarians are probably a little better. I don't know, because vegetables break down. Oh my God, that is like some toxic stuff. But in our stinking thinking, it's the same smell we have that's repulsive that we're aware of. That, if you notice, is really good guidance, because it's alerting us to something that doesn't smell right. It doesn't have the taste test. You know, it's not something I'd like to. It's probably not healthy. If I drink bitter milk, it's probably a good chance I'm going to get sick. And we have those sensations in our body for good reason, because we're designed to thrive. We're designed to survive. We're designed to have much than any of us need, so we can give it away and realize that it's all been given to us to begin with. Nothing any of us have came from anywhere other than this planet. We have not created reality when we made cars. We just reshaped existing elements that were part of the universe, part of this universe. Our bodies are made out of elements from this universe. Our brains are enormously capable of solving problems, more so than any computer yet on the planet. AI, Chat, GPT, all the different things being developed cannot compete with our capacity. And to undermine that capacity is certainly not in favor of humankind in any respect. So my sense is, if we consider it at that level, a lot of the things that seem to be really big become very small, because the proportionate, if I'm focused on a problem, it's going to seem like everything. And if I begin to focus on the solution, problems seem like very, very little, to the point where they just start to disappear. And I will guarantee you the circumstances will also disappear too. They will start to change, not because we avoid them, but because we're willing to address them without the fear that comes with it, without the resistance to it, without the fight. We just start doing what can be done. And as a result, those things just tend to go away.
You know, I had like one of the things you've been talking about lately, like the near-death experiences. And I was like really on the other side before, at a very young age. And, you know, to the point where I had to be resuscitated, you know, the defibrillator to start my heart beating again. And this was at 15. I just turned 15 in 87. And it's like one of those things I've been wanting to talk to you about that I've never talked in depth to you about, but you've been talking about it. And, you know, that's one of the things I've revisited, like, you know, the whole situation. And I guess you could say that, you know, talking to you and John has given me this, you know, revitalization of feelings, because I'm quick to put something in the dark, you know, and just leave it there and not pay it. Try to act like it's not there. Just throw a blanket over And lately I've been trying to just put myself out there as an open nerve and let it hurt if it hurts. And, when I was 15, I was trying to sell drugs. And I was trying to hide it so much that I didn't see a sting operation coming. And by the time I noticed it, they were right in my face with a gun out, and then it's like, turn around. And as I was turning around, I slipped it in my mouth and I chewed it. And I only remember a couple more thoughts after that. But in the middle of that, there's a lot of those little divine things and spiritual things that people talk about. And some people say, oh, this is not true, it's not. But my mother, for some reason that night, came and found me. And I was in an alley and some of my friends were trying to get me to throw up. I said, it's too late, I chewed it. So whatever's gonna happen, I'm going on this ride. And my mother came and found me, and I'm like in this alley, and I don't know how she found me in this alley over there off of Brooks in Lincoln. And she said, get in the car. I'm gonna go look for your sister now. And I was like, just go look for her and then come back and get me. Because I didn't want to seem like as if I was high, because it started affecting me. And then she's like, no, get in the car. And no matter how much I pleaded with her, she would not let me out of her sight. And she said, you have to get in the car and come with me now. And I got in the car and we drove to 5th and Broadway because my grandmother and them lived there. And I had whispered to my little brother, I said, if I start acting weird, y'all get me to the hospital. And I don't know why I whispered to him or nothing, because I really don't remember. These are parts where people start telling me about it. It's like a little reel-to-reel movie going on in my head. And they just put the pieces together. And then I just went into convulsions. And my mother sped from 5th and Broadway all the way to Daniel Freeman. Didn't stop at one red light. It was 100 miles per hour down Lincoln. And not one car. She didn't almost get in no accident. It's just everything just opened up. And she just drove. And by the time I got to the hospital, they opened the door and I just fell out. And I was on the ground and my heart wasn't beating or anything. And they came and resuscitated me. And the thing, coming back, because I was on life support system for about a week, and coming back to reality or life, it was like a movie playing. Like I would just open my eyes and I would see some people, but it was always grief. And then I would just go back out, and I kept coming in and out. And then when I finally came to, it was just, the part that was horrible was out breathing the life support, and they had a balloon in your lungs or whatever, and it's breathing for you. And they had to strap me to the bed because I was trying to rip it out. I was fighting to live. I didn't want to go. And at one point in time, the Pastor Holmes that lived right there on Brooks and 7th, he was praying over him. And they said I cried. And then when I asked them, I was like, why was Pastor Holmes there? And they said, you asked for it. And I didn't remember. He said, you told us, go get Pastor Holmes to pray for you. So, God, I wanted forgiveness. But I didn't remember that, But, those experiences, there's a lot more that goes along with it. But then I came out and went right back to the same lifestyle. But
that's the spirit.
But with a different frame of mind of saying, I didn't want to die, because it's not like the movies where, I'm gonna hold on. And no, someone just flicks the light off. There's no fighting, no nothing like that. And once I realized that, it's like, in my mind, I said I wanted to give someone a fighting chance instead of being on the streets. And like, I see people today, like on Instagram, they show these cold-blooded murders. It's like, what in the hell was in that guy to do that to that person or a group of people, But I never wanted to be that type of person, and I think it had a lot to do with saying, I can understand how precious that light is and how easy it is to blow that light out. You
Yeah.
know, I'd rather build, you know, so there are some things that came from it. And it was basically fear to say, I can't stop it when it's happening, you know. But lately I've been growing to the point where it's like, I'm not afraid of it. But you made me reflect, you and John made me reflect on a lot of things to open up that corridor to where I can even speak about this, because I was mainly embarrassed about it, you know, being 15 years old and, you know, sitting there and swallowed some rocks, you know, some rock cocaine, because I was afraid my mother was going to find out I was selling drugs, you know, and I put my life on that one.
Yeah. Well, you can see how those simple thoughts turn into very, very huge manifestations that
Yes.
clearly didn't help your mother avoid realizing what went on.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, true.
The simplicity of the original thought grew to epic proportions, almost threatening your life. The other thing too, David, that's interesting is talking about, I remember Pastor Holmes from many years ago, and he was a fixture in the Oakwood community. But the fact that you could ask for him in a state that you didn't even know you were in, which I imagine you were drugged to some degree, which certainly alters our memory and sort of present state to some way, but you had some knowing sense that was asking something from someone to do that was something different than just the medical treatment you were getting. You were probably in as good a place as you could be to get what you needed physically, and you knew that there was something greater than that that might be helpful. You know, that's an awareness. That is an awareness that doesn't require thinking. That's what intuition is. Just a natural sense of knowing. And if we are constantly thinking about or thinking, we think that that doesn't exist and it's mysterious and it's hard to get to and all that stuff. And all we're doing is basically committing ourselves to not witnessing it, because we're not even willing to witness the causes and the effects of our thinking. We're not even noticing how embroiled we get in the feelings and the seeming fear. That fear that we're afraid of is based on thinking fantasies true. That's what self-centered fear is. It's coming out of an imposition of induced thoughts and thinking. It's an effect of absolutely nothing going on, thought to be all that's going on. It's insanity. And yet the fear is there to tell us, you can take this path, but you're going to live with this consequence of fear, this disturbance, this chronic anxiety. All that's going to come with it, because it doesn't go away. Nature doesn't tend to just suspend itself because we don't think it's there. The laws of nature respond. If you jump off a building 8 feet high, your weight relative to that height and that ground that you're going to hit is going, if you did it identically every time, the consequence would be identical every time. Every single time. So when we do this, it isn't some strange confluence. It's actually just a simple consequence of nature saying, hey, you can go this way, but it's not the right way. And the right way would be, John and I talked about this. I know that he's not on here right now, but right and wrong is based, as far as I can see, on what works and what doesn't work. What functions, what doesn't function. What's possible, what's not possible. It's the only difference. If it's right, when I apply it, it'll work. What does that mean? When I tell the truth, I begin witnessing more to see accurately. Why? Because I'm actually, even the Lord's Prayer says, forgive me as I forgive others. It doesn't say forgive me because I'm a really good guy and, you know, if I think more about you and I'm going to bend over more often for you and do things you think you want. And finally, no, it says, as I forgive, I will be forgiven. Why? Because it's the actions I take that impact my experience. If God is already infinite, whatever that God is, however that's defined, even God might be offensive to consider for some. But if it's infinite, I already got it all. We all have it all. There is no lack. The lack is in my thinking. And what happens is I don't express that knowing nature very well. And yet, even in the midst of your trauma, you expressed it. Interesting. Not even remembering that you did it. And the use of other people's perspective, again, gave you some insight into what you were doing that you wouldn't have thought you had, but you may have had it buried somewhere in the midst of the anesthetic fog or whatever you were in a drug-induced state. So we're doing that on a daily basis, and we're doing it now. The culmination of everything that has ever happened with everyone, anywhere, and everything is the present right now that we're all witnessing. And the degree to which I have responded or reacted to those things is also the culmination of what I'm witnessing right here. I've either mastered denial and numbness and defensiveness and reactiveness, or I've had some insight into the seeming surrender. It isn't really even a surrender to begin to let things be what they are, because they already are what they are. It doesn't take me to accept them. They already are doing. We're doing what we're doing. Things are as they are, regardless of whether we accept them. But when I align my thought to those things and accept them and begin to embrace them and begin to concede that they're happening, all of a sudden I have a very different experience than when I think they're not happening, shouldn't be happening. I wish something else was happening. Why isn't this happening when that's happening? And if I can think at the same time that what's happening shouldn't be happening, that is a major conflict, because it's always happening and it's always guaranteed that it will be happening. And all I'm thinking is that I have so much power in my thought that I can make it stop happening by thinking it shouldn't be happening. There's the conflict. It isn't truth and it isn't reality. It's simply the makeup that we have to guide us so that we, just like rotten milk and rotten food, we know it's not something to eat. Imagine in the early days meat, how quickly it went rotten when they didn't have places to keep it cold unless they were living in sub-zero temperatures. But they created fire, and the fire purified it, so it allowed it to be eaten, and then salt allowed them to keep it longer, to be able to eat it without it going rotten. Those things had to be figured out. That stuff doesn't come from ignorance and stupidity by just eating rotten meat and killing yourself. It comes from actually saying, look, that smells bad. I don't want anything to do with it. Well, how can we keep that longer? How can we save that? How can we do something to preserve the resources that we're utilizing, rather than constantly have to hunt down a new buffalo and only be able to eat, a pound of it? So those things, we're designed to figure things out because they're already figured out. If we're allowing nature to be nature, we're recognizing the consequences we're facing are the immediacy. Those circumstances are the immediacy of the consequences, outlining to us how well we're doing with the owner's manual. They're actually telling us, like, it's page 38. This is how you lock a door in a car. It goes up, it's unlocked. People can get in and steal your shit. Down, they might not. They might break the window, so keep the windows up. But they have to go through, all those little steps of functional capacity come when we're absolutely willing to be honest to ourselves. We'll see them quicker, clearer, and we will know what to do despite what we think sooner than the thinking will conclude it, thinking it's the only thing thinking. Most of the thinking we do that's toxic ends up creating solutions that create toxicity in the longer run. It's a byproduct that happens immediately that takes years to begin to notice because we'd rather be in denial about it. Plastic's a great example. We talk about getting rid of plastic. We consume 500 million tons of plastic. We create 500 million tons of plastic a year. What are the chances that's going away? 500 million tons. That's a lot of plastic. Well, the Earth's pretty big, but what happens is plastic isn't natural, so it breaks down, and the little tiny pieces of plastic now are getting into the fish, and the fish are being eaten, and it's getting into the humans. So we are literally becoming plastic surgeons through our diet. We are going to be plasticized in no time. So those consequences, it's convenient, certainly. Plastic's convenient. But the causes of that thinking, if the thinking was healthy, the solution would include health all along the road, all along our seeming future as it becomes our present. It'd be a very different thing. Energy is the same thing. Why do we choose to use the most toxic energy? It's profitable. Some people can control it. Yeah. So that isn't necessary, and it's happening, and it will probably continue for a minute or two. It isn't necessary. The better we are in our thinking, the better we are collectively in the thinking we'll do about what can be done. Not as a fight, just in a shift of awareness. Just like every major paradigm shift in history has always been people saying, oh, we're not at the center of the universe. Now, all of a sudden, the orbits make sense. Now, all of a sudden, the skies make sense. We don't have to do all kinds of dances with it on paper to try to justify what's happening. It's just done, over. 2 + 2 is 4. Great, done, over. Never need to think about the steps it took to get to that point. Again, once I start applying it. Because as soon as I apply it, it works. What am I going to do the next time? What works? Unless I'm insane, unless I'm preoccupied with trying to do things to help give myself the perspective I need to finally concede what I'm doing is wrong. My suspicion, I create all the problems to give myself perspective. All of them. Not some of them, all of them. So if I look at that, it's sobering, literally, because I get to sit still for a minute and say, wow, I've created a lot of problems. It's not everybody else. It's my participation in them that's helping compel those, continue those, maintain those. Doing this together, and David, your openness is a huge contribution, and just beginning to open your mouth and talk about it and see the immediacy of the growth and the health is, healing is immediate. Disease takes time because it's not part of nature to figure out how to undermine our capacities. Our capacities are constantly trying to say, wait a minute. I got to correct now over this. I got to start dealing with this stress. I'm already dealing with everything else. I got to deal with this now you're heaping on me. My body's in great shape, wondering why I'm constantly imposing stress and anxiety and contrary actions and directions that are not healthy. If I can create disease, I can certainly heal, because heal's natural. Disease is not.
That part. Mm-hmm.
So talking about it openly, as much as I tend to do most of the talking, but I'm interested in this. I'm fascinated by it. This is the adventure of my entire life. Just to be with you and to be able to start to talk about this and broach this discussion openly and see the common nature of our own awareness and start to notice the value we give each other simply in admitting the things we're doing openly. So simple. Why? Because if there's an absolute source, simplicity is it never changes. It doesn't come or go when I think it comes or go. It doesn't have an amount that it comes in. It's always present in its full entirety, always, no matter what I think. Just to begin to remember that, and then begin to remember that I don't even need to remember it for it to be, is very freeing for my thought, my functional capacity, because it all becomes a wonderland and an adventure, an exploration, a possibility that is absolutely endless relative to the limits, especially to the limits we think are possible. And, well, nobody's ever going to think that. Those are just thoughts. We talk so clearly about what everybody else is doing wrong and what they're willing to do while we're unwilling to do what we can right here now. Pretty interesting. At some point in the big book, Bill says we suffer from a lack of proportion. And my reading of that is that little things mean everything to me and big things mean nothing. That is a pretty lopsided view of reality. Because if it is infinite, that is so grand I can't even imagine it. I can't even put words to it. Pointing at it is futile. But if we all know it, it's not futile at all to mention it and to reference it. And to mention that we already know everything. We don't need to think about it at all. And now the thinking starts to actually operate on the basis it was designed to express reality and truth rather than conclude it. And it all comes from a decision, literally, a choice. If I choose to do nothing, that's fine, but I will probably be very hungry within a week and probably notice some urges to do something. So this isn't about not doing anything. It's not about sitting still. It's not about only creating environments that seem safe. It's about starting to face the environments as they are with all the risks they include and see that there's nothing in them that really threatens my life, but certainly has consequences in my bodily functions, my human experience. But the less I do about them, the greater the threat they become. How smart is that to do? I think avoiding them is going to make them better when it just grows. The reason overdoses occur is because if we're treating the effect and thinking the effect is the solution, the problem and the cause is continuing to grow. So we need more of the symptom. We need to drink more. We need more drugs, more and more and more and more and more, because the problem's not being dealt with. It's going to grow just like any seed put in the ground. And at some point, I just think I need it because I have to stay ahead of this thing, just like pain medication, and I overdose. I've had too much. I don't even notice it. I don't even notice I'm getting to that point because I'm so embroiled in the thinking that's allowing me to continue to deal with the resistance to the growing problem and think it's not there. And think all I need to do is feel better about it, feel better, feel better, feel better. And all that's the addiction of sobriety. Constantly trying to feel better, go to meetings to feel better. Don't admit what's worse. There's somewhere in the book, I think Dr. Bob spent a lot of time talking about it. It says, trust God, clean house, serve others. It doesn't say serve others first. It doesn't say clean house first. It says trust God, knowing God's trustworthy. That's easy. If there's some source that's trustworthy and I trust that source, I don't need to do a lot of thinking about that because the absolute impact of that will become clear in everything I do, not some things I do. My thinking is aligned rather than maligned, rather than disconnected. When we feel disconnected, it is an absolute representation of what we're thinking, not reality and truth. Thoughts that have no basis have no place in reality and truth, so feeling disconnected would be fairly natural.
Yeah, I appreciate the open discussions, having them here. You know, like, you know, I work late, as you know, on Saturdays, and I fight to wake up just to get on here because I enjoy it. You know, like I used to do this a lot with a lot of the gentlemen in prison.
Yeah.
And we were going to board, but we never knew what to talk about until we got in there and then realized it was us, you know. And if you can't peel the layers of that onion and tell people the reason why this happened, and this happened in your life, then you know, freedom is not going to come to you. And just having, like you say, this is your life purpose or something like that. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but having these discussions on thinking and living, that's what got me home. And it was just to create a brotherhood of people. You know, we had a big round table and we would take IQ tests. We had this book of IQ tests and I would tease them with those and, you know, little brain teasers. And then we'll get into our discussion, even to where we would, like I said, I had blocks of wood. So every time we said, you know what I mean, or you know what I'm talking about, we'd clack those blocks of wood. So it's like, get that out of your vocabulary. We were teaching each other how to talk, how to dress, how to, you know, talk openly. And it got a lot of us free in more than one way. It started to open up, like even in the prison, to where everything wasn't handled in a violent manner, because it's like people actually knew how to say what they were feeling. And most of the people I talked to or related to were like, you know, shot callers and OGs and stuff like that. And so it impacted the way that we lived.
Yeah.
You know, to the point where, you know, sometimes they would call me and I have no idea what's going on. And like, David, you think you go in there and help this situation? Like, shit, I don't know. You know, send me to the Lions Den. You know, but I was able to help. And me helping and having an idea, everyone was able to help. So that's one of the reasons why I get up to come to this, because it's like, you know what? I have choices now, but I didn't get the owner's manual on it. So I need a lot of help.
I think we've had it all along. We've just been bullying it and thinking we can overcome it to prove we're in control, when in fact, if there's an infinite source, it doesn't need control because it's everything that is. It's not trying to control things. It's not trying to manipulate things. It's just being.
Yes.
We're actually trying to replicate that in the thinking we're doing by claiming we're in charge of everything, rather than seeing that it's actually creating the impact of us feeling apart from everything at the same time, and alone, and thinking that being alone is better because nobody challenges us when we're alone. what we're afraid of is somebody saying, you don't look that good. You don't look that healthy. You look nervous. We don't want to be found out for those things we think we're hiding. Typically.
Yeah.
And another thing too that occurred to me, we say so many things that we mean the opposite of, like getting away with something. When it comes to mental illness, when you get away with it, you're actually taking it with you. So to think we're getting away with something means we're actually maintaining it, because wherever we are, whatever that cause is that's going on is still with us. And that's interesting. But that thing that we say, do you know what I mean? My sense is we know each other knows. And it may just be a reflection of that we're trying to convey this thing that we seem so incapable of getting across in words, that we know. So that sort of worked its way into language. Like the word like has worked its way into language. Well, like this, like that, like this, like that, like that. It's not actually the thing, it's like the thing, right? It's like selfishness is an ishness, like kind of ish. Selfish is like kind of a self, not really self, it's selfish, meaning kind of ish a self. And we say these things and don't quite get that there's probably some greater sense of awareness that we're using them for, and that we're appealing to someone else to admit that you do know what I'm saying. I'm really struggling with the words because I don't quite know I haven't used the owner's manual well enough to develop the words to speak in ways that allow me to break through the chronic cycle of this repetitive conversation people tend to have about feeling good and how everything's fine and how are things going? Fine, everything's fine. It's like brain numbing to expect that that's actually true, compared to saying, I just started saying I'm, well enough. I don't know. I don't know if that's great or not. I'm just well enough. I haven't completely imploded today yet. I haven't ruined anybody's car. I haven't lit the house on fire. There's nobody dead as a result of my getting up this morning so far. So it takes some of the edge off of this idea that we're constantly trying to impress on others, because we're struggling with the impression made on our own experience that is absolutely self-induced and self-created in the thinking we're doing. It has no other basis than that. And yet the basis is everything happening, everywhere, everything that's ever happened, everything that we've ever gone through, all the decisions we've ever made. So if we're free to make new decisions, the decision is that we do not have to repeat any decision we've ever made before. We do not have to repeat any thought we've ever had before. We do not have to do anything we have ever done before. And I would suggest we never do anything like we did before, because if it's always new, we're only thinking we're doing it repetitively in the context of the thinking we're doing, when in fact it's always new wherever we are. In some way it's different because everything has changed since the last time we did it. Everything. If everything's changing, it is always changing. And my thoughts, when they're always changing and I think I need to keep them still, is a problem. That fixation on them is the brokenness of them. And to spend more time thinking about them is just committing to breaking them and wondering why I feel broken. And yet I'm fine when anybody asks. Yeah, fine, everything's great. Everything's great except right now. Except right here. Everything's just wonderful, but not here now. And let me just keep that to myself so you can continue to think I'm doing fine. That's right. Man, democracy at its worst. We're having people vote for us in manners that don't help. And we're not honest enough in our own experience to be honest with others and say, I sense something may be wrong. Maybe we can talk about it. Just open the door. You don't have to push any further than that. So one of the decisions in this group is to start to see, we meet 2 hours a week, roughly. Many of us have other conversations, fortunately, during the week, which I appreciate greatly. But if the 166 hours left are really the proving ground for what we're trying out, when we're not in the face of each other and we're not in a orchestrated environment to discuss this, is starting to actually notice the impulses and the ideas you have and share them with people. And remind them too that if they're about them, it's just a thought I'm going to share with you. I'm just, I told Katie about 6 times before I started doing this. I said, these are just thoughts I'm going to share. These are thoughts I'm having. They may seem to have to do with you, and they may. I'll let you decide that, but I'm going to give you my thoughts. So this is a thought. I'm going to share a thought with you. So what's coming next is a thought. Just like, and then I would say something. And then she had the, it didn't feel like an assault to her, because there was a lot of times, and I expect it was part of her experience, that she felt assaulted verbally by people. And when I would say things brashly, it would feel like an assault to her. And I didn't want to ignore that that's her experience, but I wanted to also be honest about what I was doing enough to begin to diffuse the idea that what I was talking about was truth and reality. And I was seeing something in her that I want her to see, because God damn it, it really pisses me off, and not notice that what's really pissing me off is that I'm seeing it because I'm doing it. And it's changed. I mean, she showed up 20 some minutes late to a lunch we had a schedule for, and I got there an hour early yesterday. So I like timeliness, man. My dad was a Marine. I know how to show up on time, and I'm almost never late. And when I am, I don't make excuses. I just tell you I'm late. But so I was a little bent, and I started to eat. I was hungry. I hadn't eaten. It was 2:30 in the afternoon. And she said, "Are you mad?" And I said, "I'm actually hungry. So I'm going to eat." And she got there and was a little, she's a tender woman and kind of soft about it. But I said, "Go get what you want. Come on, I'm waiting for you. I want to sit and we had a great afternoon. I mean, it just kind of melted and it passed. I have an edge about certain things. I don't need to brutalize people and stab them with it. But I certainly can. I'm certainly able. I'm certainly good at it. So I'm doing.
Yeah, we know that part. Yeah. Yeah, Mark's.
I relate to that. It's easy. It's natural.
Yeah, true.
Well, ultimately, it's possible. And whether it's natural, I would say, if it's natural within insane thinking, that it's unnatural. And that's we get so engulfed in thinking it's normal because we're insane. And that isn't normal, it's abnormal. And that's the whole twist. It's such a fine razor's edge, the side we take. And it switches immediately according to whether we think we might get caught. We're chameleons in that way, to the degree that we're in that kind of thinking. But to start to notice it and admit it is profound, because it becomes totally unnecessary and completely a choice. And it becomes like a childhood game. And it doesn't make a lot of sense. If you're at least 10 years out of childhood, I don't know. My sense is kids get this quicker than the adults. They realize immediately. I mean, I had a conversation with Katie's 9-year-old niece who has read 300 books in her life so far. She got it immediately. She came back immediately and said, "Oh, you mean everybody else is thinking they're the same thing too?" "Yeah, oh, I didn't realize that. I always thought they were mad with me or upset." I'm like, "You got it, child." And so I think what's happening in the world is a good indication that it is not getting healthier mentally. It's a good indication that it's becoming apparent that things are wrong enough to talk about. And I've never heard more people in my lifetime say, "I don't know what to make of things." And to me, that's a huge opening and a huge chance to begin to address things in ways that we maybe just simply haven't addressed honestly. Not because I talk about it. I'm just incessant in talking about it because it seems to me to be the only conversation. Seems to me that this is what we've been missing. I may be wrong. Many people have discussed it and pointed at it through history. Buddha talked about attachment being suffering, and I suspect that was addiction. I suspect it's the idea that when I want something, I got to have it because it confirms who I am. And that's, again, rooted in the idea that my thinking is so true. All I can ever want and expect is what I think I should have had when I made the thought originally, when I made the decision, rather than start to realize I can absolutely be assured that whatever comes will come as it comes, when it comes, regardless of the decisions I make. And now I begin to see that my intention is actually what comes, not what I thought should come. It's not my intention if it doesn't happen. What kind of intention is that? That would mean I have no intention. If what I start seeing is happening is actually my intention, I start realizing I know things are going on at a level well beyond my thinking. And my awareness starts to become a lot clearer about my involvement in that, because I start to become responsible for what's actually happening rather than what I think should be happening, wish was happening, could have been happening, might have been happening, would have been happening if not for this, that, or them, or they, but in fact isn't happening. That awareness becomes clear. What is that? Intuition, beyond reason, is what intuition is. Intuition is defined as knowledge beyond reason. There's no reason for it whatsoever. We just know we know. If that's our source, we know everything there is to know. We know everything we need to know. And if we begin expressing it, we will come to conclusions that will be conclusive rather than insanity masquerading as a conclusion that I need to then defend in a fight for my life of a self that doesn't exist because it's a thought I thought was conclusive or true. The friction tells me it's not true because there's no friction in reality. There's no opposition in reality. And if there is any opposition, reality would be reality if it was opposed, because it's not dealing in the relative, it's not dealing in a good, bad, up, down environment. The opposite of something absolute is absolute. It's pretty cool. You get exactly what it is, regardless of where you go. Why? Because it's always where we are, and essentially all that we are in real terms, not in dramatic, self-centered terms. It's not even, I would say, a self. It's just an awareness that is mutually shared by everyone. That would be a very binding, without binding us in a way that we're bound, binding in terms of just being intimately connected, synchronicitously. LA, you want to dig it all?
Sure. Yeah, sure. I think we talked earlier this week, I've been having got a conflict with someone, and I know my piece very well, right? I'm happy to bring that to the conflict. But the person I'm having the conflict with really wants to bring blame. And I'm a little stuck in figuring out how to get past the conflict.
You want to get past it?
Well, I want to resolve it. I really do. I don't want to continue to have this conflict with this person.
Do you want to resolve it or dissolve it?
Dissolve would be awesome.
Yeah.
But I can only keep my side of the street clean. I'm very willing to bring all the vulnerability, all my mistakes, all the things that I know I misstepped and didn't quite get, and can and will do better at, and sometimes I find in my ability to do that, because I practice that one a lot thanks to this discussion and similar rooms where we've all met. It can be real easy for me then to just be the bad one, the one who did everything wrong. Clearly, if I've got to understand how I've gone wrong, then clearly I am wrong. And that's not a relationship connecting, moment for me.
It's
I'm not quite. It is clearly still connected. Yeah, I agree. It's just not one that I find satisfying.
Well, it's the thoughts you have about it that are dissatisfying. It's not necessary. Yeah. I mean, whenever it's objectionable and you want to get past it, it's the attempt to try to deny it and pretend it's not happening the way it's happening. And my sense is, and we can go to great lengths and think we've done that. And if we're still interbulated, it's the thoughts we're having that we don't think we're having that are creating the interbulation. But my sense is, and you being as perceptive as you are and conscientious as you are and sensitive as you are, that most of us have never honestly faced much of anything. We've always brought our A game to it. We've always brought everything we thought worked in the past, and we wouldn't have resolutions constantly resolving problems if they were actually solved previously. They would dissolve. You would not notice you would say to the person, look, I understand how you feel. You've told me. I understand to the degree that you've told me. That is absolutely your prerogative and right. I give you all the freedom in the world because you have that freedom. And it's not going to have anything to do with what I think and say to you. I love you, and I will just let it be. And I'm going to let that live. And I'm going to live with my aspect in terms of what I'm seeing. And I'm going to be responsible for the whole thing. Whatever I have done is obviously a part of it. And I will not hold that against you because I want to be big enough to realize that we're holding it together if we're holding it at all. And there's a whole way of discussing things that changes. I mean, I don't even know the right words until I'm in the midst of it. And when I'm really willing to go, they start to come, just like I was talking about this intuitive sense. But my hesitation typically, and you might share this with me, is I'm often afraid to share the emotion that I've been holding back for so long, thinking somehow if I don't show it to somebody, it will save me from being vulnerable and weak and exposed. And there's so much fear attached to it. And there's so much dread and so much mourning and grief. I can't imagine they have anything to do with it. And yet they're giving me a chance to actually look at it honestly. And generally speaking, the diffusing of that is literally the dissolution of the problem, because the issue then just becomes a mechanical issue. We don't agree. You have different ideas. You can think I'm completely responsible, and I'll tell you what, I'll be completely responsible for you. How's that? Because if I'm cleaning up my side of the street and your side is still dirty, my street's still dirty, right? I cleaned up my side, but your side's still dirty. That's still my street. I'm going to claim that as my dirt. I'm going to go that far with you. And we're so apt not to do that and try to cut the corners and try to divide the pizza and figure out how many. In an infinite world, the pizza's never missing any pieces. You can eat all you want, and it's still got a full pizza. It's why in the program, the paradoxes say we give it away to keep it. That means if I give everything away, I get everything. Everything. Wow. Because it's the natural state of our abundance. It's the natural state of our being. It's the natural state of their being too, regardless of the blame and the shame and the fault and the regret and the remorse and the unforgiveness, all that stuff. Those are just little things we do to try to bring weight to the scale, to make balance out of something that's imbalanced. Right? It never works. And all it takes is a hair on a scale to throw it out of whack, right? It doesn't take a lot. So, in business, it's very difficult. And I expect that's probably part of what you.
No, this is actually in business. It feels so easy because in business, you can just admit that and move forward. It's not about, in these personal relationships, I do want to be vulnerable. I am, raw and exposed here. I want to preserve this relationship desperately.
Yeah, you have an investment in it. Well,
I do.
Let me suggest that you're already intimately related to this person, connected in love in every way. And to think you're not, and it only depends on your behavior now, you will end up abusing yourself and self-abusing yourself in ways to try to make up for the vulnerability, to show them how much you care, and you become a martyr to the whole situation. And that now doesn't have you any better at all.
No. And that's not where I want to head, for sure.
But
I just want to come with some vulnerability, some kindness, and, in the moments where I've tried, the person's really angry at me.
Yeah.
And I can't change that, no matter how vulnerable I can come to that relationship.
But you notice the sensitivity you have to anger. Yeah.
For sure.
And I would suggest to you that the anger the self-loathing we have to the self we think we are is so much deeper than anyone else can cause. And when they start giving us a chance to see it, seems like what they're doing that's causing it, because we've been so good at pretending it's not ours. And that's yes, exactly. That's mine. The real anger. And as you begin to confront it, and you don't need to do it with the person directly, because sometimes it's too volatile to get anywhere in the conversation. But my sense is the conversation never needs to be long, but simple. And you can always love somebody and tell them you don't quite understand. What I learned to do with people say, I don't know what to say. So I'll tell you the one thing I know, and that is that I love you. And I don't know what to make of the situation. And I don't want to try to make so much of it, that I can begin to think that I'm going to solve it, because I want you to have your experience and I want to have mine. And this is difficult for me to face. And I realize that it's coming largely from my own inability to recognize that I'm not very happy when people aren't happy with me. That I've been very tied to people closely and how they feel and what they think. And some of these investments I've made because those special people seem so different than everyone else, because I had this seeming bond that apparently has now been broken or breached in some way, which is always possible, by the way. If we have this natural bond with everybody, we choose people that kind of go along with us to help cater to the problems we're trying to hide. And when they get exposed, it feels like a betrayal. But my sense is it always comes with grief. It always comes with mourning. It always comes with a sense of fear that I've never bothered to face. And they're giving me an opportunity. We've talked about this before. Relationships tend to end on fuck you or thank you. And I'm either going to step apart because I'm going to be angry and say, fuck you, because I'm not willing to actually melt the bounds of my own limits and really be honest about it. And that means facing all those things I've been running from my entire life. And I'm a master at avoiding them. But apparently I'm not master enough to have had them diminish at all, because they've continued to grow. So the mastery has been sick. I'm a master of being a slave owner, effectively, and holding myself hostage to ideas that aren't true. And to melt those and start to realize that all they are is icy tendencies that have been left in the cold so long that I think they're hard, when in fact water, when it melts, is very pliable and very flexible and will go wherever it can naturally. Icicles don't tend to do that.
No, but it'll still break a roof.
Exactly.
One drop at a time.
Exactly. Well, and the icicles crashing down like hail will go through a windshield, right? So the same element, water, can go from hard to steam, right? And my sense is we feel that. We feel that hardness. We feel that rigidity. We feel the iciness. And sometimes it's hard to notice that we have been so active in our own experience. Those internal things that have been going on for so long, we pretend it can't possibly be me. I've been believing it isn't for so long. How could I start now? And then all of a sudden it's kind of like, oh my God, this has infected every relationship I've ever had, because I'm interrelating with everything. What am I going to see but what I'm thinking in terms of my lens, if all I'm doing is relying on that? And it takes a minute. My sense is if we were looking at this properly, collectively, and it wouldn't take a lot, people would stop for an hour or so and just hang on to each other. And cry and let the sadness that we have been mourning over, the loss that we've been witnessing in our own capacity to express what ultimately is ours to express, which is love, has been a debilitating and devastating effect on all of our experience. And we've been trying to make sense of it, and to try to make sense of insanity is insane. It's really crazy. More insanity, by the way, is not the cure for insanity. We've got to, let's rule that out.
Clearly, yeah. I just like to bring something else. Yeah.
So my sense is we're warm-blooded. Our bodies are almost 100 degrees. Why wouldn't ice, when we're icy inside, melt into tears? And isn't it interesting that our tears are salty, like the ocean, where all the organisms seem to evolve out of? You know, if that's the case, I don't know. Evolution does not prevent creation. It's not a displacement. It certainly could have been evolving creation. But it's interesting that there's a melting that goes on. And as a male, I haven't been good at that. I'm not very good at that. But I get moved more than I've ever been moved. And now it's more awe than pity. Now it's just the absolute, it's like seeing things in the symmetrical, simultaneous, synchronous nature. All of a sudden, it's kind of like, wow, I've been in the face of this the whole time and I've been feeling sorry for myself. And the self I'm feeling sorry for is just what I'm thinking. And I've been thinking it up the whole time and not realizing if I could make it up, I can unmake it. Right now, that's a decision. But the beauty of this is that we can do it with anybody, anywhere, anytime. And that's part of the the sort of mantra for Anthony, if he's still here, that I want to start talking about is that it's what we do in between these times we get together.
Yeah.
That we might take a minute and just address things ever so slightly differently in a way that we really are comfortable with and honest. And what I found is I literally have to say, I really don't know what to make of this right now. And what's interesting is it gives the other person some relief too, because they're probably on the defensive to be angry. We don't tend to get angry if we're not internally defending something. It's not the natural, the natural anger is coming as a result of a real threat. And that real threat is actually threatening our relationships and undermining our body and all that kind of stuff. So we feel it for good reason. It's not an accident.
Well, here you said it earlier, and I liked what you said. It's I'm the threat.
You what?
Right? I think I'm the threat.
Yes.
Like somebody sees me as threatening. And you had said it earlier, I can be quick in that way.
Yes.
I can feel to people aggressive and angry and hostile, and I get treated with that.
They're threatening the same thing that you're threatened with. That's all. They're threatened by you exposing in them something they're unwilling to look at because they're starting to see it. We don't react because we're not in touch with what's happening. We react because we're in touch with what we want to try to avoid happening. Right? Those are very dynamic, live expressions of what's going on. And if I want to fight with that, I'm going to fight. And if I begin to actually realize that zero in math, that it took 400 or 500 years, something like that, for zero to even be incorporated into mathematics. The thing that made math actually work was denied because it made numbers disappear and they thought it was black magic and all kinds of other things. So they didn't use it. So what did they do? Filled buildings with stone tablets with chiseled hash marks to count things, where you could do it on a piece of paper in the sand. So zeroing it out is starting to see that if it has no substance and we're maintaining it, the substance abuse is the idea that it has substance and there's no conflict in reality. So the only thing we could be conflicted in are ideas that have no basis at all. And we don't have to think about what they are, but to think of them all and say, whenever I'm feeling that, exactly what the book says, whenever I'm disturbed, no matter the cause, something is wrong with me. But here's the other thing too to think about. The me that's wrong is the me I think I am, not who I am. Because in an infinite knowing sense, there is no right and wrong. There's just what works and doesn't work. There's just absolute knowledge. And what's in that possibility is that we think what's right is wrong and what's wrong is right. That's part of the possibility of what's available in terms of freedom. But those are human things. Those aren't spiritual things because there is no conflict in spirit. There is no pieces in spirit. There is no lack. There is nothing but an absolute state of being. If that's our state of being, then all we're struggling with is what we're doing. And if we're doing it and thinking, we can neutralize all of the thinking we're doing it in by starting to see it will always happen if I make these choices to try to defend something that has no basis. When the defense becomes the only basis for the thing and there's nothing to defend, it's like I think Gabe was talking about earlier in that group text we had this week. If I'm resisting something that isn't there, there's nothing to resist. I'm imagining there's something to resist to even be resisting. And the problem is my own resistance. If I can do that with one thought, I'm doing it with all thoughts. If I start seeing that this situation with that person is giving me a view into how I relate to the entire world, I got a real solution now. Because I can actually start saying, wow, the book's true. It's accurate. I found everything it says to be unbelievably insightful and foresightful. And start to see, oh, if it's happening, let me just start where I am and notice how uncomfortable it is to have somebody angry with me. When I started this meeting probably 10 years ago, I had one at the house. I used to get nauseous from people's reactions. I wasn't used to being in the face of people who were overtly upset with me. I would just shut them down and leave them behind and stay away from them and think that my friends were all the people who went along with me until I realized, no, they're all conspiring to make me worse. They're not helping me. They're not being honest at all. But I would get nauseous. And I still feel the interesting thing about this process is that less becomes more in time. Like a little bit of this now is very, very evident to me. It used to take an enormous amount for me to get my attention. It doesn't take that anymore. The slightest bit, which tells me that it's melting and it's melting and it's melting. And what's actually melting are the ideas that I insist on maintaining when it starts to, because I think I'm going to save myself from the feeling, when the feeling is just saying to me, look, I'm just reflecting. I'm like an image in a mirror. And the longer you stand in that mirror, the longer I'm going to be there. There's nothing more than your own willingness to continue to perpetuate it. And that's what feelings are to thoughts, those reflections. My sense is from our discussion, and I remember kind of coming to terms with this, they're immediate. They don't take time. It doesn't take 8 years to figure out that I'm lying. I'm willing, Anthony, this is your mantra. If I'm willing now, I'm willing. And if I'm unwilling, I'm going to think there's somewhere else to go with something else to get some other time. I'll finally get there. And all I'm doing is basically promoting my own defiance and saying, yeah, I'm going to be in denial right now. And I'm going to wait until I'm not to finally get over it. Rather than say, why would I do that if I were not insane? And start to just come to terms with that exactly where I am. That stuff starts to dissipate but the facing of it is the melting of it, just like light hits ice. If it's not exposed to the sun, it's not gonna melt as quickly. So the illumination, the radiance, the light, the brightness, the brilliance that we all have to express as it is expressed simply by thinking of things in accurate terms at the most fundamental level, will start to melt that stuff and allow you to see it as the runoff happens, and it will diminish it. And there's a freedom because it's a resolution. It's not a resolution by resolving it. It's a dissolution by it's dissolving it. It's literally turning it back into the pliable steam and water and all that stuff. And I don't mean steam in the hot, pissed off way, but sort of that vaporous, illusory, thing that water becomes. And then it just disappears into the sky so it can come back to us again and revitalize us.
I am ready for that dissolve.
Yeah. And the other thing that I think we talked about yesterday a little bit, which I think is good for everybody to hear and remember, is that when these things start to seem to happen more often, it's your willingness, David, your own willingness to start to see them and look at them accurately, that you're starting to see how much shit literally has been going on in your midst that you think wasn't happening for years, decades for some of us. We're just beginning to witness the profound nature of our awareness and starting to see that if it's disturbing and I am disturbed, that is aligning with what's happening. It could be an illusion and a fantasy. I very seldom in dreams, I tend to get woken up because I trip over something in a dream. That tends to be the wake up for me. I very seldom trip and feel great. This is easy. No, it shocks me it's always something that shocks me out of my sleep that I'm doing in an imagined state that wakes me up. Do I need to do that in a proactive state, in an awakened state? No. Do I often? Yes, I wait till it's so bad to finally face it, rather than start to say, if it's happening now, I might as well concede it as it is here. Start to just think of things. What's happening, what I tend to do is I just say, what's happening is happening. What I'm thinking about is generally never what's happening that's worrying me. And if it's worrying me in the present, I'm generally not thinking about it. I am acting on it because my instincts have taken hold. If it's a real threat in the immediacy of the moment, I know exactly what to do. Let's get my feet moving, run like hell, fight like hell, whatever I need to do to save whatever it is I think I have. All those instincts turn back on us in addictive thinking. We think we're running it from it is going to save us when in fact it just perpetuates it because it's denying it rather than having it. How can we let go of something we claim not to even have? If we don't have it, we can't let go of it. So there's nothing to let go of. And if we claim we don't have it, we're not going to let go of it, or we would be admitting that we have it. It's crazy. I appreciate your emotion, and I don't see this as something that is, emotions get a bad rap because the tension that tends to actually, by the time we tend to express them, we are so fucking pissed off or upset that it looks like hysteria And not many people want to get near that. And it doesn't seem to be casual enough. Laughter we do openly. Few people have tears during the day that just get unnoticed, that aren't seen as something connected to something wrong rather than just simply an expression. And my sense is tears can come from joy just like laughter can. We can laugh at things that aren't funny, but we can also laugh at things that are funny. We can cry at things that aren't funny because we feel sad about it. And we can also feel awe and joy and just be inspired by it and see that that same lightness comes and melts and passes through us. And that's a very, very, I would say, natural expression for all of us, men and women. Crying isn't limited to women. I mean, how do we come up with that when we've got the same ducts and the same eyes and all that stuff? That's crazy.
I appreciate that, Jack. Thank you.
I appreciate you contributing that and opening up about it. And disillusions is interesting. And to reinforce the absolute nature of being as being our absolute nature is very interesting, because all of a sudden the things that seem so compelling all of a sudden lose the compelling nature and just become things that we can deal with in a very simple manner. So, I'm around obviously during the week, and I appreciate getting into this with you very much. All of you.
Thank you.
I'm glad you clarified that. I was getting a little jealous.
That's the spirit.
Come on in, Jana. Let's do
Laura
it.
Alice knows I love her madly. She's my heart.
I adore you. I've still got to get out to Hawaii to see you this year.
Anytime. 5 hours. You get on a plane and I take it from there. I even send you. You just have to get on a plane. Super easy. Look what you get to look at.
I know. I like the view. It's beautiful. Although I miss seeing your shining face.
It's been pouring rain. It's been insane, like buckets and buckets and buckets. And we went to the waterfall yesterday, and it was just charging like it's never, ever done in the 4 years we've been in this spot. And today it's a little bit of sun, and it's super nice and beautiful. And you should clearly be here.
She's with you.
I am. I know. I get to be there right now.
She's always with me. Every day I love my Laura Alice.
Any other points? We probably got about 10 minutes.
Wow, you're really wrapping things up. What happened? You became all business-like all of a sudden.
I just am here to maintain focus if possible. And not that love is not focused, but travel plans might be a little off topic.
I'm taking a bow hunting class tomorrow. I'm going to kill some pigs. How about that?
I'm not sure yet.
Okay, think about it.
How about that? I'm not sure. The imagery is a little bit gruesome, but I love bacon. So
all I'd say is I'd like video, please, as much as possible. We used to go hunting as kids with my dad. He would take us out hunting. But nobody does that anymore where I am. So it's really taboo.
The hunting thing is taboo?
Yeah, I think so. I think for the crowd I roll in now, they're not down. But I think it's kind of awesome. Like in many ways.
I'm going with 5 women that are converted vegans. It's true. Because they lost their health because of not proper nutrition. They were eating too much sugar and stuff. And so they've kind of come around. So a lot of bone broth and stuff. But I've got pigs all surrounding my property. So it's a good thing to thin them out and eat them.
Nothing more natural than that. That and some tears. There we go. That's our afternoon.
Not a tear.
And cleaning up our mental pigsty.
I knew there was something in there. I just had to wait it out.
So the cleaning house, is an interesting element, and starting to see that we're not of much service when we're not actually looking at that. And the one person who gets to decide for us how far we're willing to go is us. It's the one seemingly selfish thing we can do. And it isn't selfish at all to be accurate about what we're doing. It's actually the most bountiful thing we can do for others, because it doesn't create conflict. It actually creates space and doesn't fill the airwaves with static. and anxiety and stress. It actually creates bounty and room for people to start to feel less constricted and less at odds. I notice a lot of reactivity today. I notice a little bit of work has to go into mentioning anything to anyone because I get a lot of immediate kickback, and I don't particularly mind it because I'd rather things I don't mind being brash. I don't mind being direct. I want people to react the way they react. It's how they're reacting. It's not up to me to decide for them what they want to do. They got the freedom to do it. And I don't want my own inclinations to be the limiting factor in the potential for them to begin to realize what they're doing. So there's something to that honesty. LA can often feel brash and harsh, but the fact is it's the person defending that is hurt, that is brutalizing themselves, that ends up feeling what's honest in a way that seems to hurt because it's revealing the pain they're maintaining that they've been denying. And I have been witness to that in my own experience. And I notice throughout the day when people say things that get a little stuck, that don't quite fit. And I say, wow, I still have an idea about that lingering, and just noticing it, it starts to kind of, the light comes on and all of a sudden there's no shadows. There's no darkness that can avoid light. None. It's never won yet. Won't.
Well, I've had experiences in the last week. I had a gal come to visit, and I don't know why I agreed to 10 days because that's way too long, but she agreed to be sober because inside my gate, it's zero tolerance. You don't get to have the occasional glass of nothing, zero. I can't have it. I can't smell it. I don't like it. And I found a fifth of vodka in her purse because she started acting kooky. So I opened her purse and whipped it out. And I was terrible. I didn't do well at all with it. And I immediately got her out of the house and was driving her to the airport, but I found her a guest cottage and a place to stay for the remainder of her time. But I was so grateful that I immediately called my sponsor and talked to her. But then I went over and I actually brought her a bottle of vodka because I had poured her vodka out and said, you know what, you're welcome to do whatever you want. And I didn't handle that very well. I made an immediate amends, like within an hour, and said, you do you can do whatever you want. And I feel like I didn't handle that properly. I didn't stay in the love. I let the static come in, and I let my previous experiences and my prejudices and my justifications and my rules get in the way of love. And I'm going to have to release you with that because I just simply can't be around it. And if you want to go to a meeting with me or if you want to talk about it, you're more than welcome to. But I'm so happy that I feel like I can do that now without feeling like I'm losing anything or giving anything up, or that I'm not holding on to my resentments. Like I could immediately go and apologize to someone and hand her a bottle of vodka and say, you do you. It wasn't my right to throw your stuff out. It was my right to get you off of my circle of, where I am inside my gate, because you could probably do this anywhere on the planet Earth except for inside my gate. And why anyone would do it, I don't know, because it doesn't even matter. I don't even need to do the brain damage. All I know is that I am 100%, no loopholes, no bypasses, no 10%, nothing. I'm 100% responsible for all that there is in how my world is. And I just concede to that every single day, sometimes minute to minute, but it's given me such a huge amount of freedom and so much. I think I called Jack or texted him a couple of weeks ago and said I've had like 3 days of neutrality. And I'm not looking for the parade or the lows anymore, because I'm an addict of all addicts, and I'm always looking for the parade. I want to get patted on the back, or I want to feel that high, or I want to feel that low and wallow in that low and then tell you how fucking sad I am and that I need you to understand my sadness or my happiness or whatever it is. I always wanted a co-conspirator to share it with and to justify with me my feelings and stuff. And I don't know. I feel like I'm resting in love, and I think it all came from responsibility. And it's just a whole different thing than I've ever experienced in my whole entire life. I was born a bipolar alcoholic addict and raised that way, and no one in my family ever was normal. I have zero I have no conception of what normal is, but I do know that now today, because with Jack in this group and the consistent love and lack of judgment that I received for the past, I don't know, I guess we're going on 3 years, that somehow I had that aha moment like a year and a half ago about the responsibility thing. And now I'm actually resting in that. And it's an insane, it's just made everything so beautiful and so lovely. And yeah, I cry every day. I cry in joy. I cry in sadness. I cry for what was and what could be. But I just am not seeking all the time for something to be other than it is. And that's insane to me. And I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful for all of you guys.
Isn't it funny how insane sanity seems to be?
Yes, because I don't know anything but insanity. I don't know.
Yeah, that was beautiful. That was like the most beautiful thing I could have heard all day. I absolutely love what you just said. You know, it just encapsulated so much of where I'm at.
I thought I was listening to myself.
I think she went up to you, honestly.
My brother, it's so, just
Gianna, one thing to think about is that you have the absolute right to be wrong. So when you said you didn't have the right, you do. You absolutely have the right to be wrong. The difference is having the right doesn't make it right. It's a different definition of right. Rightness in terms of possibility means you can do anything you want, anything ever, anything. And so whatever you do, I would suggest you always want to do. We wouldn't make a decision if we didn't want to do it. There's always a motivation in that decision, and there's always an expectation attached to it. We always want something for what we're doing. There's nothing wrong with that. We wouldn't do anything meaningful and purposeful in life if there weren't attachments to that. There's nothing wrong with it. And there's nothing wrong with judgment. It's when you think the judgment you have is correct and true and real, just like the thoughts you have are true and real, does the contempt start for yourself because you know better, and the condemnation and the feeling of it starts for you and others. That's where it begins. It's that simple transition of thinking somehow we shouldn't be doing what we're doing and I didn't do what I should have done and all. No, you did exactly what you should have done because it's what you did. There is no should in it, period. It's over. That's the responsibility.
Well, there seems to be in the realm of my addiction that if there's not some kind of conflict or static or roughness to, say, a relationship, I don't mean necessarily a romantic relationship, but if we don't have that high of, like, I met a new gal and we've been hanging out, we're going to take the boat class together. And it's so just neutral. That's what it is. It's neutral and it's easy and it's lovely, but I can make that choice. And it also in a romantic relationship, if there's something going on, I think that we don't really like each other because there's not that tension and we're not like pining for each other. It's super mellow. And I go, well, then there's no romance there because he's like my brother now. He's not like my brother, not even hardly like my brother. And he's 20 minutes away on another island and we have so much fun when we're together, but there's not that constant tension. I'm not constantly pining for him. And he's got a lot of sobriety too, which is probably the most attractive thing about another human to me today.
In peace, our body's not releasing huge amounts of adrenaline.
Yeah.
And we have been abusing the body chemicals we create in the name of trying to feel better, when in fact we're using up things that are designed for our health rather than they kill us. We overuse them. We wear them out. Our glands get weak. Everything that's producing them gets weak under the stress of using them for things that are totally imagined. So the contentness.
Totally imagine. That's the thing. And I can conjure it up and I could call you up and say, hey, guess what? La, la, la. This is so exciting to me. Aren't you excited for me? Or, oh, this is so sad for me. Aren't you sad for me? When I could just rest in it and it's going to be exactly what it is.
Well, that restive state is, in fact, I would suggest our normal state because it's at peace, because it isn't in conflict, because it is an absolute state. There is no parts or pieces in it to even conflict, and there's no thinking in it because it doesn't have itself to think about, because it knows everything. Why would something that knows everything think? What would the point be? It already knows everything. What's it going to think about?
It's weird when you say normal, though. You go, our normal state. Can we use another word for normal?
Well, you want to use abnormal and pretend we're stuck in the disease by being normal?
Yes, I would like to do the brain damage of that, because then I can
Exactly.
use the high and the low, and I can
Exactly.
banter back and forth with you about it, and there could be a conflict, and I'll be like, right on, now we love each other. It's so good.
You are, though, witnessing the peace, the contentedness. What does the book say? We're taken to a place. It's as though we're placed in a position of neutrality. It says safe and secure, safe and protected, I think, is that thing. It says it happens automatically. The problem no longer exists. It's literally telling us that it was a fantasy. The whole idea that all I could do is drink, all I could do is use. The only thing that was the solution was the effect. The symptom was the solution. How can a symptom be a solution if the cause is the effect? The symptom's the effect of a cause. The solution's in the thinking I'm doing about that's causing it. It's not in the symptom. It's not in trying to stop the train once it's doing 100 miles an hour. It's turning the engine off before it starts that stops the train.
Well, I took a few notes here. It's good old page 67. And when Laura Alice, when we were talking about what was going on, and I don't even know when these notes were. My sponsor now says I should have dated stuff so that it could be like, 2013, 2020, whatever. I don't know when this note was taken, but on the bottom I wrote, disregard the other person entirely. Only look where we are to blame. That caught my eye. And then I wrote in the other side, fear is an evil and eroding thread. And then have a kindly and tolerant view of everyone. But somehow that tolerant brings me around to thinking that, I'm kind of just putting up with them in a, you know what I mean? Like I'm judging them, but I'm being taught like
Do you think Bill suggested we should be kind and tolerant because he thought we were kind and tolerant?
No, fuck no, we're not. I'm not even kind and tolerant to myself most days.
Exactly. He knew that we were prone to unkindness and intolerance. That's why would he mention it if that was something we were already doing? The fact is, when we are sick of ourselves and sick and tired of the self we think we are not tolerant at all because we are trying to tolerate something that doesn't exist. It's impossible to tolerate it because it's incessantly irritating and annoying.
That irritating and annoying thing, it's gone. Because it feels like it's just so stupid and self-defeating and ego-based. And I don't know. Well, I guess I do know that what is, and I'm super grateful for it. I'm just so grateful all the time now. It's the weirdest thing, but it's not that parade I've been looking for.
It's the weirdest thing. It's insane to feel sane. You see how quick, though, even our language kind of betrays these underlying tendencies we have?
Because it's unusual.
I would suggest gratefulness is the natural awareness of something so full of greatness that is just profound to even witness. And it isn't something we have to do by making a list every day like it's some sacrilegious ritual we need to do. It's literally the recognition of the awe of greatness, starting to say, I never even imagined it could be possible to witness this. Of course, I felt depleted and depreciated and less than and disconnected and low self-worth and low self-esteem. Of course I would, thinking those thoughts about who I was is all that is, rather than beginning to witness the absolute fullness of the greatness. And the great fullness is really that awareness that you're describing, Jen. It just becomes natural. There's no effort in it. Exactly what the book says. We don't even think about it. We don't fight it. It's automatic. It just comes exactly as it says.
When the central fact of my life today is the absolute certainty that my Creator has entered into my heart and lives in a way in which is indeed miraculous. He had it going on way back then, and I've read it 1,000 times, but I never ever felt it. I was always like, 1 degree off. Well, I could almost get there, but then I have to be tolerant to fuckface. And now there's no fuckfaces anymore. Everyone's, you know what I mean? There's just no more fuckfaces.
Well, I'm glad Lady Frances is young enough not to know what that means.
Well, I know. I was like,
you notice the size
for a baby to show up
of little Lady Frances.
Oh my God, beautiful! Oh my God. She's so
She's getting so big. I remember when she was like a raisin.
Oh, she's so precious. Look at her. Oh, baby girl. I'm glad you can hear your auntie. Your auntie can be very bad like that. Sorry, baby girl. Oh,
no. For Lady Frances,
and she knows a fuck face when she sees one.
That's for Lady Frances's life and all those following her in this young thing that we tend to think of leaving we talk about the children being our future, but why don't we leave them a future worth having rather than one that's filled with more peril and neglect and anxiety and stress and devastation? And I don't think we've been very good at that. And kids today are suffering suicidal tendencies at single-digit ages. And my sense is they're suffering from the awareness of the stress and don't know what to do with it. And neither do the adults, because we haven't been very good and we haven't been very mature. When people get bitter as they get older, it's because they're not maturing. And all fruit matured is sweet. Bitterness is an indication of something not going right, not growing up. We have a chance to actually communicate that, talk about it, be open about it. I don't think it takes a long time to do something that reveals something everybody already knows, compared to thinking that we might have to tell them what they don't know and explain it to them in the same way that you're having some friction with that person you love, Laura Alice, and the effect of what they're feeling is hard to take. But my sense is it's really the hardness of our own taking this thing we call a self seriously that we really struggle with until we see, no, that isn't even there. I'm just coming to terms with this thing that I have literally impacted every relationship I've ever had in some way that's depreciated it and lessened it. And I feel so desperate to cling to those that seem like it isn't there because I'm so desperate to get over this thing. And the fact is, there's nothing to get over. It's just beginning to say, if it's just made up, if it's our makeup, why not just admit the word is made up? It's all that it is. If we can make it up, we can stop. We can stop by not starting. We can stop by not choosing. We can stop by realizing choice always allows us not to choose. It always has, it always will, and it's a sickness to think it doesn't. It's just a reactive tendency that creates a looping circle of thoughts thinking of itself, and a thought thinking of itself like water gets stagnant, turns to poison. Toxic thoughts are that poison. It's not other people's toxicity we're worried about. It's our own getting out, and it's our own we're reacting with. And that is a profound shift in terms of my experience for humanity. And Bill really nailed it. And yet he still struggled with emotional sobriety. So we are his legacy for any of us that are sober. He also introduced something that went well beyond alcoholics because it's provided 150 or 200 different 12-step programs for all kinds of symptoms. And what we're talking about is all those symptoms under one umbrella of a mental obsession that is the cause of going back to those things once we do stop, whatever those things are that we do compulsively. It's the obsession that drives us back. So we're talking about that openly. We're talking about it as an undermining principle. And that is also to point out that everyone has a chance anywhere to get help from people that are interested in your well-being. Everyone, everywhere. There are people out there who are interested in your well-being. And if it's a symptom you're struggling with to begin with, and you can recover from it, the clarity of what we're talking about will become much more obvious when you're not preoccupied with thinking the only thing you can do is kill yourself in the meantime in some soft, subtle daily way that you resent and you regret and that you are heartbroken over. You can act like it's the greatest thing you've ever done and still make believe that that's true when it is absolutely not true because it's killing you slowly. And we all know it and pretend we don't. That's what keeps it going, is the denial, the defiance, the defensiveness. There's no defensiveness in truth and reality. There's no defensiveness in love, none. There's no conditions in love. So to think that we have unconditional love is to be redundant again. Love is unconditional by its nature. It is what it is, as it is now. It's all that is. It's the root of all that's ever happened and the potential for us to even discuss this.
Well, my responsibility dialogue is not always well accepted. I went to happened to be at 3 meetings in a row in a 24-hour period of time with someone that had the same story, which is totally fine, of course, because everyone, you do you, but she was bracing against the fact that she was abandoned as a child. So her frontal lobe in her head was bigger than most because of this abandonment. And some guy had walked 10 feet away from his child in a baby carriage, and she really let him have it. And she felt really justified about it. So then my little talk after when they asked me to speak was just that you're just 100% responsible. And she didn't like it. She said, no, I was, abandoned as a child. And so I can have these feelings. I go, you can. I said, but look, I wasn't fucking fed most days. I said, and I became a chef and I grow things behind it. I go, it's a choice. And I don't know. I feel the freedom in taking the responsibility and not bracing against the ugly, mean, and bad things that were, because what is. But I feel like, yeah, that's sometimes it's too much for people. My neutrality can be too much.
People are going to do what they want, and they don't have any obligation. Bill Wilson spent 6 months trying to convince people that what he saw was accurate and they could recover. And nobody responded until Dr. Bob responded. It took 6 months. And it took Lois to point out to him that he stayed sober during that 6 months. He hadn't even noticed that. He was so frustrated that nobody else got it. This isn't about other people getting it any more than the message at the 12 steps says we tried to carry the message and practice principle. We're trying. We're just doing what we can. We're doing what we're willing to do. The trying is beginning, my experience is beginning to see that everybody's already perfectly intact, and the only thing they're struggling with is the same thing I'm struggling with, which are thoughts that aren't true. Starts to diffuse my insistence that they listen to anything I have to say and just say, look, this is a thought. It's just something to think about. If you're interested, could bring some relief, maybe not.
And that's what they say in the book, right? It's just a thought. We don't have to do it.
Well, we're always thinking because we're always getting information. So there's always something going on. But the decisions we make are choices. The content of those thoughts, by the way, you're talking about discontent. My sense is that contentness comes from realizing that discontent has no content. It's like going to Netflix and there's nothing showing. How satisfied would you be to go there and get nothing? The discontent is actually the lack of content. And when we're content, we're actually dealing with the content as it is, which is at peace. It is quiet. It's not disruptive. It's not excited. The book even says, watch for excitement.
Yeah.
But the broader point of that 6 months Bill spent that I discovered when I started reading a little deeper into it is that a lot of those guys he originally talked to that refused to hear what he had to say got sober. Most of them, many of them got sober. Very interesting. That part has been sort of left out of the conversation. The fact was they weren't quite ready to hear it. Didn't mean they couldn't hear it. It just meant they weren't ready. That's a choice they make. That's what we get to let people do, is make their choices. Why? Because we get to make ours. And to any degree I make choices that deny what's happening, I am asking myself to see what's happening in someone else is an imperative I need to correct, rather than witness the actual correction that I'm looking to do or unwilling to do in myself. Comes immediately.
Your consistency helped, I think, all of us, though, because no matter what, you have been consistent from day one, just consistent. You never been wishy-washy. You never give us a loophole. You don't let us bypass. You just calmly and kindly and tolerantly bring us. I hate it when I say bring us back around, because you're already there. But you know what I mean.
Well, you can start saying that for me then, and I won't have to repeat it.
All righty, there. That'll work. I'm ready.
I only repeat it because my sense is that we're so mired in the conversation, and the conversation can go off in these loopy ways that basically then reinforce the loopy ways, which again then starts to feel normal, and we're just on some new hell-bent path, wondering why we're starting to feel depressed again and upset and angry and all that kind of stuff, rather than just tamping down. What I do today is what matters to my experience today. It's not what I've ever done before. But if what I've done in the past has proven to work, I will start utilizing that more readily than something I keep hoping will work someday that's never worked, in the insane idea that somehow I'm going to get it right. It just becomes natural. And when we're talking about real nature, we're starting to, my experience is circumstances are an absolute owner's manual. Consequences are an owner's manual showing us in our circumstances what it is that we are misgauging to be witnessing what we're seeing. It's an owner's manual saying, here's a circumstance that you can now work on, because I'm going to offer you some perspective in what you're apparently not willing to see in what you're doing. Because when I'm thinking for myself, I am trying to make a single point, and that is that self exists. There's no perspective in that at all. None. I'm trying to make one point. All I am is what I think. And since I can't ever make that point, I lose perspective, I lose engagement, I lose the potential to function on a level that is inclusive, and I become this exclusive automaton reacting and reacting and reacting for the threat of being found out for what I'm doing that I absolutely know is wrong, but have the absolute right to keep doing.
I just don't want to enable that that kind of thing when someone's bracing, like the fucking frontal lobe of her brain's bigger. So for the next 40 years at every meeting, she's going to go, well, you don't understand. And there's people like backing it up going, I would be upset too if there was a baby in I'm like, it's Maui and there's 30 people at the open market and he was 8 feet away getting in the side bowl. Chill out.
But for whatever reason, Jana, the fact is, if it isn't true, it isn't true. And it doesn't take my announcement of that for someone to recognize it, because their recognition of it is the fact that they're struggling with it. And to think something that happened 30 years ago is happening now as a result of that is to both make the claim that it's happening now and also deny that it's what's happening now that is the representation of that thing way back then. To think of it in the past is the way we continue to pretend it's somewhere else, that we need to dig further, do more, get more, be less this, be more that. All that stuff means that it's up to me to confirm reality and truth, which means, once again, I am the creator of reality and truth because I can block it. I can't block it. I can only preoccupy my attention in an insane environment and think that because it's all that's happening or seems to be all that's happening, that it is reality and truth because nothing else is happening than what I'm thinking. That's insanity. That's just going around and around and around and around, thinking a dog, when he catches its tail, has been fulfilled. How useful would anybody with a pet be with their tail in their mouth all the time? Try to take that dog for a walk. You'd be dragging it down the street. It would be animal cruelty.
Well, any of you guys are welcome. It's just me and a cat right now, and I've got an extra bedroom and a bath, and there's 3.5 acres, and I'm almost done with our second guest cottage. So if you want to just come and rest in love, you're all my brothers and sisters, and you're welcome at any time.
And she's speaking to everyone listening, too.
I'm open to it. You got to be sober. That's the only thing.
You got to be sober, and you got to be willing to have this conversation the entire time.
Yeah, you have to sit through this on a Sunday. You have to hang with this on a Sunday.
So emotional sobriety is what we get to deal with if we've recovered from any compulsion we have. It doesn't mean there aren't people out there struggling with compulsions that aren't annihilating their life, that they don't see as compulsions, but just things they like and love to do that aren't really that good for them. But emotional sobriety is the ultimate essence of sobriety because it's dealing with the mental aspect of the disease and the obsessive thinking and the incessant thinking and the seemingly demands that we place on ourselves that are unworthy of anything because there's nothing there that's worthy.
It's the next level of sobriety.
Self-abuse. It's interesting that we think we can abuse a self that's made up. When in fact, the abuse is the thought that it's real and true rather than made up. If we think of it as made up, it's all of it. You all of a sudden can realize, oh, I don't have to keep making that up. Who I've been posing as is an imposition on my experience. Impositions become impressions. Impressions become depressing the longer I maintain them.
You think I'm getting new grooves in my brain because I don't go down those rabbit holes anymore that I was so familiar with, that were so warm and friendly, and my angst behind them when I could go down and go.
I think you're utilizing the brain that has had grooves in it a long time, and you're not trying to undo it, but actually just let it do what it does.
Wow.
And that alone is, our brains are more powerful than any computer on this planet has ever been developed. They're more capable. We are expressing, probably Einstein felt that we express between 5 and 8% of our capacity. Wow. My sense is if that's the case, 100% of our capacity would be creating chemicals in our own body that would give us experiences and allow us to function with our body so far beyond what we're doing today, both in terms of longevity and health and vitality and all of the things that would be so natural, but also create chemicals that would have us feel well because our being would be well, we would be well-being, and all of a sudden experiencing things in an elevated state that would not give us this impression that our body is heavy and a drag and needs more energy and needs all this stuff to constantly, we need to constantly fix it because it's under the weight of this enormous mental stress.
But it needs a mantra to be okay. I Like a mantra will fix everything. If I just had a mantra, I'd be okay.
Yeah. I need a Ferrari mantra. I need Enzo Ferrari to give me a mantra, which is, you know what it probably is, Anthony? Vroom, vroom.
That's good. I like that. I'm gonna write that down. I'll send it to him
Instead
soon.
of om, it's vroom, vroom. Love you guys. Thank you.
Love you.
Thanks, Jack.
Thank
I like
you.
that actually.
Or Alice, I'm
Great.
here for you always.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Jack.
Jana. Love you. Have a great weekend.
Sturgis, great to see Lady Francis.
Hey,
can't believe-
Francis. Oh,
Sturgis,
beautiful.
how old is she now?
7 months.
Just 9.
A little
actually.
later. Yeah,
Oh,
little later.
Yeah.
really?
Yeah.
She is
Wow.
getting big, my God.
She's beautiful. She's amazing.
Skip right over crawling and start walking, we think.
Oh my
Yeah.
gosh, baby girl. Oh, little lovely. Bye, you guys.
Love you guys.
Love you. Bye.